I love an espresso martini, and I think it's kind of one of those like guilty pleasures. A lot of bartenders will kind of be like, oh, you know, because it's just one of those drinks that when somebody sees it, they instantly want one.
Hello and welcome to Best Sips Worldwide. I'm your drinking companion, Susan Schwartz, an American travel writer living in London. Thanks to my mother's love of martinis, the first words I spoke were shaken, not stirred, and I've been obsessed by the history of cocktails ever since. Through the years, I've been lucky enough to sip some of the best made by the best. Hear that sound? It's time to cozy up to the bar and let me introduce you to the movers and shakers of the world's most famous watering holes. Time to get rid of the idea that the only coffee drinks out there are the espresso martini and the white Russian. After listening to our guest today, Alix Nardella, the UK brand ambassador of Mr. Black, you'll be ordering and loving a coffee Negroni. I did.
So it's a blend of 3 different single origin specialty coffee beans. So we do direct trade with all the farms. So it's kind of one step better than fair trade. So fair trade's a set market price. Direct trade is we're buying directly from the farmers. At the moment, we're buying from Kenya, El Salvador, and Papua New Guinea. But this kind of changes depending on the season and the time of the year. So coffee, being the seed of a fruit, is seasonal, and because we do have those relationships with the farmers, we're able to go to them and be like, hey, what's good right now? And then kind of that gives us a lot more kind of opportunity to play around and discover new coffees.
Were the founders really big coffee drinkers beforehand?
Kind of. So we've got two brand owners. We've got Philip Moore, who's our distiller, who ran Australia's largest like herb nursery for about 20 years before he started distilling, and he's won loads and loads of awards for his distillation. And then Tom Baker, who's kind of like, I guess, the face of the brand, I guess, who used to be in industrial design and worked for loads of big companies doing ad campaigns and things like that.
So we had to stay up a lot of late nights drinking coffee.
Pretty much. And he was kind of like, you drink so much coffee during the day, and then you go out at night. Why is it that at 5 o'clock people are kind of like, oh no, I can't have a coffee? And then if they do, the coffee liqueurs that are available aren't actually using real coffee. Especially, yeah.
Really?
A lot. Like there are a few brands which are using real coffee. So Galliano Ristretto uses a blend of Robusta and Arabica. St. George Nola uses real coffee as well as some chicory as well. But a lot of other big brands will just use like coffee flavors and extracts. Whereas we're the opposite, where real coffee, no flavorings, no colorings, anything like that. Like we don't even filter it. So we were just kind of like really passionate about coffee and decided to make a boozy coffee that tasted like coffee.
And of course, the most famous drinks are probably an espresso martini that uses coffee.
Yep.
And I guess Kahlua and cream, kind of.
Yeah, like a white Russian, like the dude
right.
kind of Big Lebowski. Yeah, I think coffee liqueur kind of got a bad rap. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that coffee liqueurs in the past didn't really taste like coffee. It was more kind of like syrupy, kind of sweet, vanilla-y caramel kind of flavors. Whereas with Mr. Black, because it is real coffee, you have the beautiful like chocolate, caramel, licorice tones, but then you also have that bitterness that you get from coffee. So you can use it in so many different ways. So like...
well, hold on. I'm going to stop you there just for a second before we get into the cocktails, because I want to talk about you for a second. Now, you are Australian, and the product is Australian.
Yes.
Is that just a
coincidence?
Happenstance?
I think so. So I'm originally from Melbourne, Australia. We make Mr. Black about an hour north of Sydney, the Australian Central Coast. So different state, about a 12-hour drive apart. And I was actually living in the UK before Mr. Black was even anything. So I joined the company about a year ago, coming up to a year. And I think it was just kind of a happy kind of coincidence. My friend Mitch, who now lives in LA, owns a bar in LA, but was working for Monkey Shoulder at the time, originally worked for a distribution company in Australia. When he heard that Mr. Black was coming to the UK, he got in touch with me because he thought that I'd be a really good fit for the role. So yeah, got in touch with me, passed my details on to Tom. Tom then got in contact with me. It was like 3 or 4 interviews, I think, phone interviews and then face-to-face interviews. And
your friend Mitch said you'd be good for this role, so obviously you had a background in cocktails. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
So I've been working in hospitality for as long as I can remember, basically. Like, I mean, when I was a teenager, I worked at McDonald's for like 4 and a bit years.
I love that you call that hospitality, but yes.
Well, the training you get is actually really, really good. They like basically teach you really good ways of structuring everything, and like fast, efficient service, which is great. And my grandmother owned a tea rooms and gallery and a bed and breakfast, so I'd help her out on the weekends and things like that. And then when I was 19, I was working in an office, but I got a part-time job working in a drum and bass nightclub to save some extra money so that I could travel overseas. So when I was 21, I left Melbourne and I went to Mexico for a few months and then went to Peru.
So you learned a lot about tequila and then a lot about pisco, right?
Yeah, I drank a lot of tequila, a lot of mezcal as well. It's really funny, in Oaxaca, there's like these big supermarket chains which have loads of flavoured mezcals. So like over in the UK and in Australia, mezcal is this really kind of like traditional precious thing. But I remember being given little samples of flavoured mezcal in Mexico and being like, this is so delicious. Like, we can't get any of that here. So yeah, Peru, was working in a hostel, and then went to Buenos Aires in Argentina, fell in love with the city, stayed for 1.5 years, and was working in cocktail bars in Argentina.
Was there a draw to cocktails and cocktail bars?
I think,
or just you happened to find yourself there?
Yeah, I think it was. I was traveling and I wanted to continue traveling. And hospitality is such an amazing industry that it is something that you can do anywhere in the world. Like there's bars in every part of the world, and I guess I was just really lucky to find jobs in like good cocktail places. And so after 1.5 years in Argentina, I moved back to Melbourne, where I started working in more kind of fancier places, I suppose. So in Melbourne, I worked at Eau de Vie, which was awesome, and kind of my first kind of introduction to like the speakeasy style. So we had to wear like 1920s clothes and things like that, which is really lovely. And then was in Kodiak Club, which is an American whiskey bar, which is more of a party bar, but had an amazing, amazing selection of whiskies. And then I moved to Scotland.
Oh boy!
So I was working in the Bon Vivant up in Edinburgh.
What drew you to Scotland?
I fell in love with a Scottish lad.
Yes, that can do it.
And his visa was up, and I was like, hey, I've never been to Scotland, so.
So what part?
So I moved to Edinburgh for about 6 months, and then moved to the Isle of Islay and was working in a little restaurant there because I wanted to learn about whiskey. And I thought, there's 8 distilleries on Islay. So I was like, hey, go there, learn about it. Like on my days off, go and visit a distillery. So I worked there for a summer, and then moved to Glasgow. Worked at the Kelvin Grove Cafe, which is awesome, and then moved down to London. So which was
always with a love of whiskey.
Yeah, I love whiskey.
And working with whiskey, I do too.
It's really good because like Mr. Black goes really well with whiskey, so it's just this like in kind of like a Manhattan. If you add a bit of Mr. Black in as well, it's just makes it a bit like smoother and complex. So,
and I've heard a rumor that you've done very well in some whiskey competitions.
Yeah, I entered the Glenfiddich Malt Mastermind twice. And I came second 2 years in a row, so which is awesome. Like it's such a great learning experience. And Mark Thompson, who's the ambassador, is an amazing man. And got to the first year I entered. So Ali Reynolds won, and we got to go up to the distillery together.
The first year you entered, you came in second.
Yeah,
fabulous.
It was really fun. So got to go to the distillery, which was awesome and stay in the house and go out in the town. There's not that much to do in the town. I remember
except for drink whiskey.
We walked into this tiny little pub. I think every single person like turned and looked at us when we walked in, and we discovered an old bottle of yogurt bowls on the back bar, and so we were playing darts and drinking yogurt bowls.
That was probably very dusty, that bottle in the back.
No one's going to drink how long it had been there for. Oh gosh. And then the next year was really fun. So I came second again, and the other two finalists, so Michael Cameron, who won, and Dan Berger, who came third, were both really good friends of mine. So we all go up together. Mm-hmm. It was great. It was just like a mini holiday with my pals.
Dust off that bottle.
I think we finished it the first time. My head was pounding the next day.
Well, since we're talking about cocktails again, let's go back to the cocktails.
Yep.
And how the coffee cocktails have grown since, White Russian and Espresso Martini, even though Espresso Martini was, of course, such a cutting-edge drink.
So, I love an Espresso Martini, and I think it's kind of one of those, like, guilty pleasures. A lot of bartenders will kind of be like, because it's just one of those drinks that when somebody sees it, they instantly want one. So if you're working a bar, all of a sudden you'll get swamped with orders for Espresso Martinis. But White Russian's delicious as well. I tend to kind of use nut milks in mine rather than like heavy cream and stuff, just so you can have a couple more and not feel as guilty. But because Mr. Black has that kind of the bitterness of real coffee, it can be used as like a bitter. So things like Manhattans and Negronis, if you cut down the amount of sweet vermouth and add Mr. Black in, it does just make it more kind of complex and rich.
So it's not all about, I guess, the coffee flavor. It's using the coffee as an enhancer, kind of.
Well, I mean, coffee's amazing. There's more flavor compounds in coffee than in wine. It's just depending on where the coffee comes from, how it's roasted, the brewing method that you use. You're going to be able to get so many different flavors, from like super kind of green vegetable notes to stone fruits to licorice to toffee and just kind of everything in between. So like Mr. Black sour, so kind of like as you would make an amaretto sour, but with Mr. Black instead, tastes like cola lollies, which is something that I never expected. And then someone made one for me, and I was like, kind of mind blown, almost.
Has it been hard to, train, in inverted commas, bartenders to the wonders of this and the different uses?
A little bit. Like I said before, I think coffee liqueur kind of has like a bad rap. But I'm really lucky in the fact that I have a product which is genuinely delicious. So, I just get people to taste it. And that 9 times out of 10, that will kind of convince them to what they can use. And I'll go to a lot of bars and I'll ask them to make me a drink. Like, hey, can you make me like a Harvard, but can you add this in like a little bit of Mr. Black in instead of your vermouth? And then when they taste it, they're just kind of like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that, which is awesome, seeing that little surprise on their faces.
And it must be great to have kind of a clean slate, because it's not an old brand. You have this clean slate of making new cocktails that no one has expectations about. So it isn't like, with the whiskeys that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, people expect a certain taste. I don't know, they have expectations. With this, there really aren't. So it's introducing people.
It's really fun. A part of my job is to come up with kind of standard serves or signature serves and things like that, which is always really fun because I try and do things a little bit differently. So it kind of gives people an opportunity to see that it can be used in so many different ways. Martin at the American Bar at the Savoy came up with a cocktail for London Cocktail Week last year, which used sherry and champagne with Mr. Black, which was incredible. Like the acidity from the champagne went so well with the coffee, like the acidity in the coffee, and then with the sherry it had the nuttiness kind of tying it all together. Talking to people about a champagne cocktail with coffee liqueur is not something that would generally come to people's minds.
Because they're not thinking of it as a bitter, really. No. Right.
So that's really cool, kind of like with my trainings and things, talking to people about coffee as a flavour. We spend so much time and effort actually making and sourcing our coffee. That's going to be the main focus on what we do and how you can use those flavours.
So what are some of the cocktails you've thought of?
I'm
sure there are hundreds, but maybe you could tell us about one or two.
Yeah, of course. So I've done, one of my favourites is called a Bee and She, which is using Fino Sherry, Mr. Black, black and walnut bitters, and a dash of Tabasco as well, which is really lovely. So you've got this beautiful dry sherry, and you've got the richness of the Mr. Black, the bitters to kind of balance it, and then just a tiny dash of Tabasco, which just gives it a really lovely heat at the end, which is really nice, kind of like aperitif-y. What else? I've got another one. So I love Ribena. So I try and make drinks with Ribena. Got one which is tequila, lime, Mr. Black, and Ribena, kind of like a margarita-esque drink, which is
I really want to try.
Yeah, it's really lovely, like really fresh, and again, blackcurrant and coffee are two flavours which just go so well together.
When you say it sounds so obvious, especially because they're both they kind of look alike.
And a little coffee cherry.
And I can see how that Ribena could go well with coffee.
No, it's really nice. I've done a couple of like kind of hot drinks as well, which go down well in the UK, the weather being what it is. So one I make is kind of a twist on a Mexican café de olla. So with mezcal, like brown sugar and cinnamon, and like hot filter coffee in Mr. Black, so that kind of extra coffee punch, which is really lovely. It's like delicious.
Well, you are making me so thirsty. So I think we need to go to the bar and have one of these drinks.
Sounds
so
good.
I really want to thank you for coming along.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much to Alix for introducing us to Mr. Black. Ask your local if they have it, and if they do, try it. Next week, we travel back in time to the Roaring 20s, when London's theatre district was the place to be. Jason Vickers and Pablo Moreno have the champagne on ice for us at the Waldorf Astoria's Miss Homage Bar. Until next time, bottoms up. For more information and links to everything you've heard about, plus a bit more, please visit bestbitsworldwide.com. Thanks for listening to Best Sips Worldwide, a spin-off of Best Bits Worldwide. Always remember the wise words of Oscar Wilde: all things in moderation, including moderation, and never drink and drive. Okay, I said that last part. Theme music is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. You'll find me at the bar